musician is not enough. It's never enough. And the most important thing to do is the pastoral thing. But I don't think you have to choose which wing, actually. I can think of, there are some times I can think of where you choose the pastoral piece. For instance, now you're saying, well, what are some of those? I can think of some. For instance, I also direct here at Baylor, the Baylor Men's Choir. I have a few things that I believe about men's choir or about the choir that I direct that aren't necessarily the same as some of my colleagues might believe. And that would be that, for instance, I have never cut anybody on the heart in the Baylor Men's Choir or in the choir at church. I've never said, you sing, you don't, yes, no, or something like that. I don't think that is pastoral. Okay. For instance, I think we let people sing. We work to train people to sing better and better and better, but we don't, for instance, cut people apart. That just would be something that I would consider a pastoral role that some people might not consider the same way, but that would be an example. So, what distinguishes a pastoral musician? And I just came up with a pretty hefty list here of some things a pastoral musician does. A pastoral musician ministers to the whole person and sees people as the complex beings that they are. We as pastoral musicians, we're always looking not only at what we see on the surface, but we're looking beneath the surface. We're looking at all the things that comprise a person. So everything we know about a person is information that has a potential role or a possible way that we could be a better minister, that we could possibly minister to them in a more effective way. And we'll talk about what some of that is. So the second thing is we learn the stories of those to whom they minister. Over time, we have a depth of knowledge about someone, and we share a body of memory. In our church, I am the only person who's been there a long time. Everybody on our church staff is much younger than I am, and most of them have quite a lot less experience, certainly a lot less experience in our church. As a matter of fact, they're right now almost all in our interim. But so I'm often the person who knows the background, and I'll say, well, that's why this person does that, and that's why they're here, that's why this, here's what their mom did, and I remember this, and this person's related to this person, and on and on. Here's the story. Or this is who this person used to be 20 years ago. This is just one version of this person, and let's be easy on it, or something like that. They've been through a lot, or all of those things are important to what we do, and so that's how we invest in people. So how is it that we get to know these people so much, and how is it that we're constantly investing in who they are? Well, I think it's being curious. That's my belief, that we're always curious. We want to know the stories of people. We're always wanting to know more about somebody. So how is it that we learn about people? Just jump in. But let's state the obvious. What do? We talk to them. Yeah. First of all, we talk to them. And then what else do? We ask questions. Yeah. We ask questions. We ask more questions than we provide answers. So we're full of questions. That's the big thing, are the questions. I happen to be just a really, really curious person, and I like to know about people. For instance, I know that Grant's from Alabama, and I know his father was in the same dormitory that I was when we were freshmen, and I know he has a sister, his one sister, and I've met his parents, and I know a lot about them, and I know his undergrad and what he did, and there's all kinds of stuff I know about Grant. Now, Grant's not in my church, but that's just the person I know a whole lot about. And I could go around, and some of you I've seen through the years of Alleluia, and I know more about you maybe than you think I know about you. Because I don't remember everything, but I do often remember things about people, because I really like to know about people. I grew up in a family of curious people like that, and I think that's where I got some of that interest from. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was not from the community where I grew up. She married my grandfather and moved there and spent the rest of her life there. But she knew everybody's lineage and all the connections of all the people in this small rural community. So as a consequence, as a result of that, those stories because she told me and I remembered them. And so I know all these things that a lot of people don't necessarily know. But it is very important that we learn and know all of these kinds of things because they do have an effect on our ministry. We learn to identify verbal and nonverbal cues. That's tricky sometimes, but what are the verbal cues are quite easy, like because those are the things people tell us or the things we hear or something like that. But what about the nonverbal? What about the things that you don't know except you just happen to be intuitive? I think that being intuitive is something that we also can develop. I think some people are much less naturally intuitive, but I think we all have the ability to do that. I'll give you an example. I had a meeting scheduled about 3 weeks ago with this person that I know. Just a person I know. It's in Florida. Well, this person canceled the meeting. And so I thought, that's really weird because you're the one that asked for this meeting. And that's really odd, and you're new, and it seems like you would be wanting to meet with me, and I'm not on campus, and you are, and I'm the one that, anyway, I just thought, that's odd. And then we scheduled again, and then something came up again, and we canceled again. And then we met sometime last week. Well, the first thing he said to me is, I know you don't know me very well, but I'm going through a really, really hard time, and I have really had a mental health crash in the last few weeks. And I thought, I thought something. I believed that you were having a mental health issue. I just knew it in my gut. I thought that's what was wrong with you. And then I said, I've been so worried about you, and I am so sorry that I didn't say something, but I couldn't say something because, I didn't know not to say something. But I worried about him so much that I prayed for him several times that I'm afraid something's wrong. And then that led us into, we talked about the business part of what we're supposed to talk about, but mostly we talked about his mental health. And I shared some things about my own mental health at this time when I was his age, which is mid-40s, and how mid-40s kind of catches up with you. Some of you might not recognize you've been doing something long enough and it sort of just catches up with you a bit. It did with me. And I shared with him, and we really kind of had this really pastoral care talk rather than this professional talk. But that's one of those things where there was no verbal clue. There was a nonverbal clue, which was this is not what I thought you would normally be acting like, so therefore something must be wrong. You see the difference in something must be wrong rather than I bet you're a real loser and I can't imagine why I hired you. The difference in that. And then trying to encourage this person, you're new, this is going to be really hard to be not well and be new. Anyway, but that would be an example. Last week I reached out to my neighbor to, if you were to drive by my yard, you'll see that it looks beautiful, except for where it doesn't. And then it has these spots that look really, really bad where the grass has died, and then the water is washed away, and then the grass won't grow anymore. My neighbor was he doesn't work like that, he's going to fix it. Well, he never did fix it. Meanwhile, I have a roof problem, and he does roof stuff, so I called him and came over. The first thing he said is, my wife is in the hospital. He called me and said she's in the hospital. And I said, well, what's going on? Or he said she's in rehab. That's what he said. So I first thought, what bone had you broken? And whatever, something like that. Because I'm thinking about my mom in rehab, things like that. Well, then it turns out that she has an addiction and she's in rehab, and they have 3 children, all under 5, and a 6-month-old baby. And and here we are. We spent the next most of an hour talking about his life. You see, pastoral care, it just popped. It was right there, and then he was willing to tell me which was the gift. See, the real gift that both of these men gave me is they told me what was wrong. Now, I hope that that's because somehow or other they trusted me. They knew that it was okay for them to tell me that they would be safe to say those things. And, because I'm their dad's age, a little older, but something like that. But I also else, so I just don't know. But I think what we want to do is pray that we'll be the person that people will be willing to share their pastoral concerns, and then pray that we also have the capacity to hear them well, and give them hope. What I did in both of those situations was I shared about my own some mental health struggles from my past, and then I shared about some addictions that were not my addictions, but were very close to me. And I said, you are not in shame. You are not in a place that is not well traveled. And thank you for not hiding that and putting on, things like that. We live alongside those people who are in our care, good times and bad times. We show up for funerals, hospital visits, graduations, marriages, births, and all of that. I wrote in my notes, we show up even if it's only briefly. Because I think sometimes I tend to see if I can't sit down and have a really valid visit with you, then I'm not going to do anything. I've learned to try to say, even if I just step in and say, I'm only 40 minutes from class and I got to be there in 5, just got 5 minutes, or showing up at the door. One time I had a colleague, a woman that I used to teach with, who shared with me that she was going to have surgery. And she said, I don't want anybody to know I'm having surgery, and I haven't told anybody. And she said, I don't want to see anybody in the hospital. She said, but I'm telling you, so if I die, somebody will know. And so what do you do with that? So the next day, she had her surgery, and late that afternoon, I went by, I opened the door, and I said, hey, and she was crying and said, hey, I said, I just want to be sure you're still alive, and I'll see you soon. And then I left. And then later, at some point, she told me how grateful she was that I showed up at the door and just made an appearance. So there are things like that we know about, but it doesn't always have to be a long visit. But we do need to make it happen in some way or other. As a matter of fact, hospital visits shouldn't be long. What do you do when you get, like at our church, I get graduation invitations from all of the kids at our church. And I get them from most of the men's choir guys. And what do I do with all those graduation announcements? Can I go to everybody's graduation? Yeah. Do they want me to go to all those graduations? Probably not, really. But I send all of them a card, and I send at least a small gift. I'm a believer that we send something, even if it's small, because a small gift is no bigger than no gift. Okay. I teach students all the time about becoming a person philanthropic person. And how is it that we become a philanthropic person? And I say we give to the things that matter, even if it's $1. Even if I send a check with something for $5, I contribute. Then when we do have money, we already have a habit. Because if we don't give anything when we don't have much, we won't give when we do. At least that's my belief. So I'm a believer in do something. But last year we had 11 graduates in our church, which was great. We were a little church, and we had 11 people. So I wrote all of them a personal note with some kind of memory or something and sent them gifts. I didn't send them all the same gift either, which I'm just admitting to you. And I was so hoping they wouldn't compare notes how much they got. But some of the kids were real needy, and some of them not nearly so much, maybe. And I didn't send everybody to. But my big reward in all of that was I got some nice thank you notes, but I got this one kid who wrote me one of the most beautiful thank you notes I have ever received in my whole life. And it was, I can't remember the whole thing about it, but he had played in our worship band and all this stuff, and it was just, oh my gosh, it was, I kept it and put it in my little file that says special correspondence, and I stuck it in there because it was so valuable to me. That was worth a whole bunch of money. Not that I was paying for that. We showed tangible care for others. There we go. Notes, meals, visits, emails, cards, spoken words, and more. We do more than pray. Prayer is good, right? We all agree that prayer is really, really good. I don't know. What can I do? And I said, I want you to know I would love to do for you. I don't know that I can do anything for you, but I would love to. Well, I've been thinking I'm just going to go get some money out of the bank. I'm going to take it over there and pin it to the door and say, here's some money if you can buy it, or if you don't, you still got some money. That's all I know to do, but I want to do something, you see. Sunday morning, I have had this real conviction that some people I needed to send cards to, I haven't sent cards to, because when my wife died 5.5 years ago, so many people did so many nice things for me, and one person sent me a card every single week for a year. And her son died a while back, and I only sent one card in 3 months. So I felt really guilty about not being, to her, the friend that she was to me. So I thought, well, I don't have time to get a card out and address it and all this stuff, but I do have time to text. So Sunday morning, between rehearsal and service, I sat down and I had 5 people that I needed to send something to, and I sent them a text. Because a text was better than nothing. Okay. So I'm just sharing some things that I, try to do, but I try to do something. Try to do something. We advocate for others. We speak well of them. We rally for them for their good. We look for ways to make their lives better. I've had the wonderful privilege of having some people that were not necessarily my mentors, but they were people that were in my sphere of influence, people that were in my sight. And those people became my mentors, although they didn't actually know they were my mentors. They were people I was watching and mimicking, actually. One of them is Mary Kay Parrish. She's the woman that taught at Oklahoma Baptist University for years and years and years. And one of the things that she always did that I try to do is every former student that I would say, I know so-and-so from, a graduate from the past. She knew everybody. She's been there forever. And she spoke well of every single person. She always spoke well. And when she was talking about our students, she always spoke well of them, even if they weren't achieving at the grades. She'd say, they're really good kids. She would always say something nice about them. Some of you have been teachers. I know some of you have around here, like Cheryl and others. If you've ever been in a teacher's lounge, it's not always a pretty place when it comes to the way students are talked about. Which is one of the reasons when I was a teacher a long time ago, I finally stopped going. It was bad and smoke in those days. Teachers were smoking in there. And those 2 things. But speaking well of people. And what does that have to do with being pastoral? How does that have to do with being pastoral? Yeah.
It connects to 1 Corinthians 13, where it says love believes the best about someone. So it's a special way to love someone, to maybe not discount other things that you might know about them, but to always put that in the proper context of God's agape love being the transformative agent in their life and yours.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It also sets them up to, when something does happen, you have a positive thought about them. You're not just wishing evil for them, or your background saying, I guess that was kind of your turn, something like that. Some of you have been in my children's music ministry class through the years. I'm not going to ask you what I said, because I would be sad if you didn't answer, and you would be sad if you didn't answer too. So I'll just answer for you. But one of the things that I always say is that every parent in the world is looking for someone to love their child. Every parent is looking for somebody to love their child. So when you have something positive to say about their child, they will glow. My 89-year-old mother will light up when you brag on me. Still. And you are giving a gift when you have something cheerful, positive to say about someone's child. So I go around the church looking for parents and looking for something, to say positive about their kid, even the ones that lie down on their stomach and roll around on the children's message on Sunday. I try to say, well, you've got a lot of energy or something. Yeah, counsel or something. Anyway, I was on one of those one time, and this woman said, well, some people think I'm negative. She said, I'm not negative, I'm just truthful. and I thought, ooh, lady, please don't give me the truth. I don't need to hear the truth from you. I'm scared of that. So, yeah. Spend time with people, spontaneous time and intentional time. Take time in between things. Most of the time that you have to spend with people will be happenstance time. It'll be just you ran into somebody here. I saw, who was it, at the grocery store the other day. And I said, I don't think if it weren't for this HEB, I would ever see you. Because I always see you in HEB when I do, and I'm so glad that this happened again. And we caught up a little bit. But see, those middle times, take those, but rather than pretend you don't see somebody, go ahead and, have the conversation and be with them. One of the, so spontaneous, but also the intentional times. I really try to be, back to the intuitive thing, if I really have this some kind of sense I ought to catch up with you, I really try to follow that. Not always, but I try so hard to find some time to follow up with somebody. Take the time. Know when to talk and when to listen, or when to be silent. Those are some of the conversations I told you about last week. Trying to ask some leading questions rather than just giving my own experiences over and over. That's hard for me. I have to be diligent about that sometimes. When my wife was ill 5 years ago, I went to the Carter Blood Center one day to make my donation, my blood donation. And there was a woman sitting there that I know who's the wife of a man that I work with. And I sat down and she looked over at me and she said, I don't know what in the world is saying to a person in your place. I think it was the most honest thing that anybody said to me the entire time that my wife was ill. She said, I don't know what to say to somebody like you. And then she sat there, and that's all that we said. But I knew that she wanted to say something, but she didn't use words that would have tripped up all over herself probably. She just said, I don't know what to say. And that meant a lot to me. I'm not saying that that's what we should say to everybody. I'm not saying that. But the honesty of what she said, I've never forgotten that. It's made me pause and say, how many times do I have no idea what to say, but what have I done anyway? Say a whole lot sometimes. Do we tend to talk more when we don't know what to say or when we do? For most of us, when we don't know what to say, we just gush and keep on going. Yeah. So think about that some. Last week my mother has 6 people that care for her around the clock. So part of my job is to keep up with all these people and all this stuff. So last week my mother had a doctor's appointment and was not well, and I was calling, and it was a shift change, and I was talking to her. It was interesting that the women that care for her both, my mother had a UTI. Well, they both took time to give me some pretty great detail about their experiences with UTIs. Okay. At first, I thought, whoa, this is some major oversharing we're doing here. And then I thought, wow, I am so grateful that we have developed this relationship where you're trusting me, with your own experiences and what happens when you have one. I thought, wow, this is really, I'm complimented. Yeah. But you see sort of the turn there, yeah, because we become friends. We become friends through this. So that's trusting. We know what to talk. Respond to hunches and leanings. I sense something might not be right, and that's really basically the same thing we were just talking about. Is I sense something might not be right. Yeah. I wrote a note here, but I don't know what I meant by it, so I won't respond. Yeah, I don't know what it was. We follow up on information that we learn from others. When we learn about something from somebody else, and it relates to pastoral care, we should follow up on that rather than just do nothing about it. Now, if it's not something that doesn't assume confidentiality or break some confidentiality thing. But I don't know about you, but I think oftentimes confidentiality is really, really important. But sometimes confidentiality becomes our excuse for not doing something. We're saying, well, I don't want to get in their business, and maybe they don't really want. Well, I'll tell you a story later about another thing where I think sometimes we risk confidentiality sometimes, and we go ahead and do something even maybe when we shouldn't. The truth is, there are very few things that are confidential. And mostly confidential for a lot of people, especially people that are sick, it often means control. I want to control the narrative. I want to control the news and whatever. And what they forget is that everybody already knows. They're just all talking about what you haven't told them yet and trying to figure out what they think you should have told them that you didn't. That's what I noticed, especially with my mother had 17 siblings originally. My dad had 11. So I had 56 aunts and uncles and a lot of cousins. Okay. Well, you can imagine there'll be somebody sick in our family all the time. And there's always somebody that, they're not telling anybody, I'm just telling you. Those are my mother's sisters. They're not telling you. But they just told you to 15 people. So we all know it. I know that we all know it. So, yeah. Slight exaggeration, maybe, but probably not. We use music to build up others. This is a quote from Hugh Sanders' funeral that Charlotte Fuller said that Hugh Sanders used music to make people instead of people to make music. And I've said that a number of times, but I really, really, really think about that over and over and over, using music to make people instead of people to make music. And friends, I have had the greatest joy of my life watching how music has made people and how music has shaped their lives, how it's made them better, how it's made drawn them to Christ. Story after story, I can tell you of how music has drawn people to deeper relationships, to better health, to all kinds of things. But have you all ever been a part of when you felt like somebody was using you to make music? Where you were a commodity being utilized to make music for sometimes even one person, because it wasn't even a communal thing? No. Probably all share sometimes like that. What are some of the things in our vocabulary that we say sometimes that might lead people to think that we're using them rather than otherwise, or that we're not all in this together?
I need you to make this a priority.
Okay. I need you, yes.
If you're not here, we can't do this.
Wow. That's a lot of weight. Yeah.
Try not to.
Yeah. That's, although sometimes it feels that way.
I think
doesn't it?
sometimes.
Yeah.
Using a lot of I language as opposed to
Yes.
we language.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's another really big one that we say a lot of times. We're referring to a section of the choir and we use, like before sopranos, could I have my sopranos? And I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh, my sopranos, how did you own me? How did you own all those women? Oh my gosh. Come on. Could I have my? Yeah. My choir. When we're talking about our choir at our church. All this kind of language we use. Yeah, last week somebody was giving me some kind of horror story. I don't remember what it was. But it was just, I was like, I can't believe someone would actually say that to a choir. I have to go back and think of what it was, but I was just horrified that someone would actually say that. And about something about, if you really care about me, something like that. My reputation on the line here, or something like that, I had a voice student one time that was so unprepared for a jury, miserably unprepared. And I said to him, I said, about yours? He came back, and a week later, it's like his last voice lesson, came back a week later and did a respectable job in the jury. Amazing. And what did I say to him in the beginning of the next semester? What I've realized from you is that you are so smart and so capable, and I have been giving you too easy music, I've been boring you. And so we're going to change that this semester. And here's what you're going to say. Instead, because if you can learn it all in a week, then hey, I've been teaching you wrong. But anyway, but this whole idea of community helps to relate the text to everyday life. How do we take texts that we are singing and relate them to everyday life in a rehearsal? A choral rehearsal, a rehearsal with a band, with a group, with a preparation for Sunday morning. What are some of the ways we make that music applicable to life? I have some ideas, but what are some that you think might work, or maybe you use? Grant, what's one that you have?
I think spending enough time with the text myself that I have some way to personalize it and then share that with other people in my week.
Adam?
I'll often ask the choir, what's a line of text that stands out to you?
Yeah. That's my go-to. What's a line of the last hymn today that stood out to you that meant something to you? What's the one in that last hymn that you were like, oh, I needed that?
I think within the context of rehearsal is one thing, but the way we really pastor our people, particularly students, is use the texts to apply to their individual character in their lives, to honor them by dedicating a particular hymn to them, sort of at the end of a choral year or something. And because this hymn speaks of this strength, I see this strength in your life. Those are real tangible ways to make these texts happen.
Yeah, I often would say, like today, the line that I love about the last hymn is, days of darkness still come over me, sorrow's path I often tread, but the Savior still is with me. See? And every time I get to that point, I say, that's my life. That's me. We made room for me in this text. See? So often I'll say, what's a line in this text that you wish you thought about this week? Something like that. Or just what's meaningful, and then suddenly people have all these really important things to say. If you don't have to say the deep things. You just have to give space for somebody else to say. And then if you have a person who says way too much, then you have to kind of manage that. As a guy that I had in men's choir, who would like to respond other than and that person knows that jokes can go a long way.
One of the things that we do, and I've been doing this a long time, this is my wife, and she writes a choir devotional every week. She writes an evening. And typically she will try to relate either to one of the texts that we've been rehearsing, or maybe it's going to be a hymn that we're going to be singing on Sunday. She'll work this devotional all around that piece and help people relate to it in that way. So,
I bet you get a lot of people that say thank you for that.
she does.
I would imagine, yeah. I've done that in a church before. I don't do it these days, but I have. Yeah. Sharing personal things are really, really important, as long as you don't turn it to yourself somewhat too much. Leading questions, even your own stories. We view worship as grounded in pastoral care. We plan and lead worship for people who we know and we love in a specific context. When I was a young teacher at Midwestern Seminary, the dean of our faculty was Dr. Vernon Davis, who now actually lives in Waco and is well into his 90s. But he was talking to me about worship. I was the worship professor and taught worship courses. And he was talking about preaching, and he was talking about the whole area of preaching. He said there is no preaching that isn't pastoral. And he said, so you have have to know people in order to be a good preacher. And so then I turn that to worship planning. You can't be a good worship planner if you're not a good pastor and you don't know about people. So I started a practice years and years ago when I'm doing worship planning. I tried, people in our church sit in the same place every week. I don't know about your church, but I can take attendance from the platform, So when I'm planning worship, I imagine these people seated in these different places. What's this going to be like for them? What would this text be like? Is there something here for this person? Is there something for this person? This person, just went through this. What is here for that person? How are they going to hear what is here? And so but if you don't know the stories, you don't know how to ask persons. When I was planning the worship for today, or this opening session, I always think, what are music ministers needing? And I always think it's hope, it's encouragement, it's new perspective, it's that this is bigger than me, that we're moving towards something greater than ourselves, and imagining all these different things. Today, several people said, they were assuming that I'd planned that related to Hal Hodgson's death. But that was the part that God did see. So I didn't know about that several weeks ago when we first started working on all this. So it's been interesting in our church the last few weeks how I planned worship in May that have been using all through the summer, but it's been just remarkable how, wow, I don't think I could have planned it that well for this week. Now, you can't depend on that to always happen. You can't say, well, I'll do it and God will do it. I think you have to be a little more intentional than that. But this whole idea of being pastoral is so important. See the people in the pews when you're planning. Choose texts that make a difference in people's lives. I think when I'm planning choir music and certainly congregational music, I try to always think, is this going to make a difference in somebody's life? And what's this going to matter? Does this have anything in it that matters? Now, I will admit this, every once in a while we sing something that's just fun. That doesn't, it's not wrong, it's not bad, it just isn't deep occasionally. But most of the time we sing things that have some real meaning in them. So looking at the choir folder for a period of time with this, maybe 12 anthems or something, what do we have that's this, and what do we have that's in this area, and personality, this feel, and that person, all those things. And that's the way that we use text to think that text are pastoral care for people. The text are ministering to people. They are coming into their hearts and their minds in very important ways. 2 weeks ago at our church, we sang a song by Porter's Gate called Let Us Be Known. I don't know if any of you have ever sung this song. It goes, let us be known by love. And anyway, that's just been in my mind the last 2 weeks. I can't remember the chorus. You remember?
And the Father, no, it's the Holy
And the glory.
To
And
the
the glory.
Father.
Yeah, to the Son and to the Spirit, yeah. And the glory is very heartful. It just really got in my soul. But I'm just, this song, let us be known by love. And I've been thinking over and over, let me be known by love. Let me be known by love. But it just was such a pastoral encouragement to me. It doesn't always stick, especially when I remember texts from so many things, like every word to when we all get to heaven, and because I learned that as a child. But those things matter. It helps to construct the parishioner or the choir member's life soundtrack, is what we're saying. A pastoral musician assists a choir member in improving skills. We empower people with the gift of singing and worship through music. So how is it that helping somebody to sing well or to know about music would be a pastoral care issue? What do you think? Jim?
We can boost confidence.
Yes.
And that can be really huge. I've noticed that there's almost never a time when I'm teaching music that it's not also music therapy. There's a lot of people that have baggage about what so-and-so said, about how they could sing or how they could play,
to believe that all teaching is pastoral. So when we teach, we are being pastoral. Let me use an example. Suppose you have a person in your children's choir, your youth choir, or even any choir that can't sing a tune. Okay, so this person's not singing a tune. They know they can't sing a tune. All right, you are a musician. Therefore, you know about music. You know how to teach people about music, but you don't do anything to help the person. You don't do anything. You don't say, "Could I help you? Could you come in sometime early? Could we meet? Could you?" And then you give them some ways to learn to sing a tune and some helpfulness. What messages are you giving that person? Be that person a child or an adult?
That they're not
Important.
I don't care. You're not important enough. Somebody over here.
I said they're not good enough.
You're not good enough. Yeah. You don't even deserve for me to try to help you. And I'm the person with a music degree. You know, you've got all kinds of training. You should help. Doctor, for me, says help, right? I should be able to help you even if I'm not a real doctor. See? And you do nothing for me. Therefore, I have no worth. So I don't think that we have a choice but help people. And I think that then we don't have a choice but to not give up. Now that has consequences. That means that we may have somebody singing that isn't singing as well as we wish they were. Yeah. But that might be pastoral care. I could give you a whole bunch of ways and experiences. And oftentimes these things have ways of working out, and so we've already talked about these things before. But I have really begun to believe that not to help somebody musically even is poor, is to fail to give them pastoral care. So as Jim said, it gives them a better life. It gives them more confidence. It gives them less anxiety. I would even turn this around and say, how many of you in this room has music been the thing that's kind of saved your life? It might be the thing that, I don't know, how would I have made it through high school without music? How would I have made it through high school without the band room to retreat to from all the bullies? And, all the band kids are holed up in the band room to stay away from those people. Or something, just all these ways that music has helped us. We will move ahead. We are continually improving our pastor skills. These skills are learned and they must be practiced. I don't believe that you are, I'm just not a very caring kind of guy. Yeah, I say to my students, you can't be a minister and say, I just don't do kids. I just don't do old people. If we are minister people, all people don't choose. So, but we're continually improving our skills. And in order to improve our skills, what must we do? Do what?
With ourselves?
Yes, but to improve ourselves, we have to.
We have to be pastor.
Yes, and we have to evaluate. Yeah, we have to be pastor ourselves, so we have something to give, but we also have to be evaluated. Have any of you done what's a CPE program, like a clinical pastoral education program that seminaries do? One of the things that they do in a program like that, and I know because I taught a seminary one time, but what they do is they have to do these verbatims, where everything that they said when they met with this person in this, what's it called, person in the hospital who sees you in chaplain, thank you. Chaplain concerns. Anyway, you have to write down everything that you said and everything they said. And then you have to share your verbatim with your team, and then everybody has to critique what you said and what you should have said and what you didn't say, and all this kind of stuff. Okay, would be helpful for some of us in our pastoral care. So, how many of you go away from your pastoral care experiences and you critique what you said or didn't say? Sometimes you say, "I should have said that." Oh, I visited with the family on Saturday, and I went away saying I talked too much. I should have let them talk more, and maybe I went over a line. Maybe I shouldn't have been as personal about this. Or, I didn't just beat myself up because I did go. That was something to be good, but I still was trying to think, how could I have done that better? How could I have been a better pastor? So we have to evaluate. So anyway, I encourage you to think about those things. We build people up and we offer hope. We never miss an opportunity to offer hope. We're vulnerable about our own struggles, and vulnerability almost always gives vulnerability. It almost always helps someone else be vulnerable. Most of those, there are people who overshare, and or maybe, but I don't think oversharing is being too vulnerable. I think that's oversharing. And I don't think they're the same thing. We acknowledge that people have big problems, and we learn not to be shocked by them. And that's one of the most important things I have written on this whole thing. I would like to be, I tell my students sometimes, I am a whole lot of things, but I am not naive. And Adam, I'm sure you've heard me say that before. I am not naive. I would kind of dare you to shock me, because I've pretty much heard it all. Now, ministers are often these very carefully guarded people who just don't know much about what goes on in the real world. And we give the impression that we don't know about terrible things. And who does these terrible things? People in our congregations, and maybe even us. But we pretend that they're not there. So I encourage you to think about that as something like, not to be shocked when somebody tells you the worst thing you can imagine. And you will have heard a lot of things if you've been a minister for a long time. It's a huge gift. If you need to get out of your own naivete. And naivete is not a good quality for a Christian that I have decided. You don't have to decide this. But think about it. You follow up with people. If you say you'll do something, you do it. How many, say, I'm going to come see you, or I'm going to check on you, or whatever, and then you don't do it. I had a friend one time who was a minister, and finally I said to her, you've got to stop lying to people. You are disappointing people all over the place because you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm your best friend. Then they need you and you don't have any time for it. I used to sing in a choir that this director would always say, I'm here for you. I'm here for you, whatever you need. I'm always here for you. How many of us were in this choir? About 300. How can you be here all the time for 300 people? I care about you. I will do my best to support you at any time. But you don't say, I am always here for you. Call me day and night. Don't say what you can't do. But be truthful. I think that's really important. Practice and study hospitality. You create common spaces, welcome the stranger, and then hospitality is always reciprocal, and we're not going to take much time there. But it's always, if you offer hospitality, you receive hospitality. So if I had you come to my house for dinner, my gift is to you to provide dinner and space and welcome to you. Your gift is to accept that. Some of us are very good at giving it, but we're not very good at accepting it. How many times in church do you get offered things? Like sweets and cookies and things, all sorts of things. How many times do you really not need all that food? But should you take the food? Somebody prepared it for you especially. I think you should take it and then share it with your friends. You see, we accept things, which is the other side of hospitality too, and the side we often miss. I'm going to have to rush. We realize that pastoral care is never static. We're always learning to respond differently. We kind of touched on that. We work hard on your own reflection, your counseling, your reading. We work hard to be healthy enough to do pastoral care. And then the last time we learned to accept pastoral care, which is what Jim, I think, might have been referring to. We learned to accept it from others and let others give it to us. And sometimes I've learned just to say, I need some pastoral care. Please help me, and be more honest. Enhancing our pastoral care skills, 8 quick suggestions. We observe someone who does it well and study their habits and actions. Imitation is often the best teacher. So I've been very fortunate to be around some people who do great pastoral care. And some of them were not official pastors. They just did pastoral care very, very well. And I learned some great stuff from those people. Reflect on practices that have been meaningful to you in the past. So when did a conversation, an action, or a word impact you? That's a good question to ask. And then how might those same kinds of things be something that you model? Learn to make pastoral care individual instead of a one-size-fits-all. You can have a one-size-fits-all, but you don't send the same card to everybody you know. It's better than no card, but maybe, yeah, write a different note in all your cards, something like that. One's not a one-size-fits-all. Find some practices that you do regularly. Now, this might be the one-size-fits-all kind of. You send everybody a card at the end of the year. You always send a Christmas card to everybody in your ministry. You send a note every time people are absent. Something that is always sort of your thing. Because then when you don't do it, they'll be upset with you. Trust me. I had that happen too. You know, I was absent and you didn't get in contact with me. You have something that you leave when you're making a pastoral care visit. I always talk to students about leaving something when you make a hospital visit. Some little, even if it's just a little card that has your name on it and you say, have a great day, Randall. That way when you go to the hospital, the person's asleep, you don't want to wake them up ever, you leave something so they know you came. If you're going to go, you might as well get credit for going. That sounds harsh, but if you're on a pastoral, if you're on a church staff, am I telling the truth? I'm telling the truth. How many people call the church and say, nobody came to see me? And somebody came, but there was no way they knew that somebody came. So you better make sure you leave a paper trail. Yeah, I learned that a long time ago because I was going in and was working on my dissertation, and I was going in late at night and doing work at the church and getting all my stuff done at, you know, in the midnight and all this stuff. And the secretary and returned and talked to the pastor, you know, I haven't seen Randall in 3 weeks. You know, so I learned I better say, hi, and 7:15, hope you're great. 10:30, check it out. You know, so I learned to leave notes to the secretary, you know, because she runs the church, right? And, yeah, anyway, just leave something, yeah. Take some risk. Risk awkwardness, risk rejection, and risk lack of knowledge. Even if you don't know what to say, take some risks. I'm going to tell you a quick story here. My deceased wife was a really great person to model taking risks. There was a time when we lived in Oklahoma, and there was a woman in our church that was dealing with some very serious mental illness and some problems. She hadn't been in church in a long time. And everybody was saying, as we often do, well, I just don't know what to say, and I don't want to disturb her, and you know, I don't think she'll come out, and I don't think she'll whatever, all these things. Well, Brenda got this big conviction one night that she had to do something about this. So it was on Wednesday night, and she came to me before choir. She said, I'm not going to be in choir. I'm going to go to name the person's house, and I'm going to see her. I'm going to go see her. Well, Brenda got there. She went to the door, knocked on the woman's door. Nobody came to the door. Nobody said a thing. And so Brenda stood there, and she said, called in. She said, I know you're in there, and I'm not leaving until you come to the door. And then she went around to all the windows and knocked on the windows. Well, what happened eventually? The woman came to the door. All right, and then when she came to the door, then she opened up to the possibility of another visit. This woman is still a very close friend of mine on social media. She checks in with my kids regularly. Why does she do that? I don't know her that well, but what about Brenda and her? Yeah, Brenda did the same thing with our neighbor a few years ago who we had this suspicion that this woman was being abused. And Brenda just said, I can't take this anymore. She just went over and knocked on the door and she said, I think something's going on with you. And I'm afraid you're in danger. What did the woman do? She said, could you take my kids for a while? I'm worried about them. Can you watch them? They stayed at our house pretty much all night. But she had some kind of conviction, and she didn't just do nothing. So I sometimes I think, what would Brenda do here? You know, Brenda would do something braver than I would. No, the pastoral care is not the same as counseling and therapy. We don't solve problems, but we do show up for them. Okay, remember that. Last thing, realize that some issues are too big for normal pastoral care, and that sometimes people that you can't do for them. You can continue to meet with them, but you're not going to do, you're not a therapist. You're going to befriend them, you're going to ask about their therapy, but you're not going to do their therapy. So referencing, giving somebody over to the next person is also a great pastoral care gift. And let's not ever forget that. And then the last thing that I had on there was, if you are struggling with something yourself, and somebody's coming to you to talk about that issue, let that conversation go just about this deep, and then you say, I love you and I care about you, but I have reason to believe that I may not be the best person to offer you the best pastoral care. And then you let someone else step in and do this. And I think we all know where those lines are, we're just not always good at calling. Okay? So just to offer that. I wanted us to have, I thought this was going to be a really short session, and I was expecting a whole lot of questions and all this kind of stuff, and a whole lot of conversation. I'm sorry we didn't have so much of that, but thank you for being